Hey guys, it is Matt here from Scoop in Response. Today I wanted to go over my video for Osgir the Reconstructor, which is a new commander that was spoiled with the Strixhaven Commander decks, so the Commander 2021 product. I've never actually built a Boros commander before, so this was really exciting for me to brew this all up. I've also never really done a Stax deck, or at least a dedicated Stax deck before, and that's the direction that we went with this guy. So Osgir the Reconstructor reads as a 2 red white legendary creature giant artificer. He has vigilance and 1 sacrifice an artifact. Target creature you control gets +2/+0 until end of turn. So a sack outlet in the command zone. Quite cheap as well, so obviously not free, but still quite good. And then its second ability, X and tap, exile an artifact card with mana cost or mana value X from your graveyard, create 2 tokens that are copies of the exiled card, activate only as sorcery. So this guy is absolutely busted. You get to do some absolutely mental things. One of the first things I realized though was outside of a Khan Lattice Lock, there is really not a great reason to play Khan the Great Creator until now, because we don't have sideboards in Commander. So with Osgir's abilities, we're actually exiling artifacts, so it allows us to take advantage of Khan's ability to get artifacts from exile. So we can do things like play a Soul Ring, tap a Soul Ring, sacrifice a Soul Ring, exile the Soul Ring, make 2 copies of the Soul Ring, and then get that Soul Ring that we had in exile back into our hand with Khan. So it's just absolutely insane positive mana value plays, which is what we're going to use to break parity with all of the Stax effects and the mass land destruction that's included in this deck. So I've called the deck Osgir the Friend Maker. I would very, very much encourage you not to bring this out at a casual table. You can see below from the budget and from looking in the Moxfield link yourself that it's quite an expensive deck. Certainly would be a lot cheaper if you removed the OG Dual Land, the Mox Diamond. There's plenty of expensive cards in this list though, so definitely not something that I would say just jump right in and buy all of it straight away. So we'll go over the deck from top to bottom. Planeswalkers, we've got Ajani Vengeant. This card is just absolutely great as a sort of light stacks piece. You've got a tick up ability, target permanent doesn't untap during its controller's next untap step, disrupts big mana dorks, disrupts land, stops creatures from attacking you. You've got a lightning helix on a stick with this down tick, and then eventually a mass land destruction for 1 player, which is absolutely great at breaking parity, because obviously it's just one-sided for potentially the person who's highest ahead. Khan the Great Creator, you use him for a Mycosynth Lattice Lock, but you also use him to turn targets into, you use it to turn non-artifact creatures into creatures, so you could kill them. The other way around, you can use it on non-creature artifacts to then kill them. You can use it to get your artifacts out of exile, and he's just an absolutely fantastic card in this deck. Nahiri, we've got the looting effect, so we'll go over why that's really good down the track. There's a lot of reasons for us to put our mana rocks into the graveyard and loot with them, or even just expensive artifacts as well. In Boros, it's unless we want to play dedicated disenchant effects, it's sort of hard to find space for something like that in this sort of list. So we've got a downtick for an exile artifact or enchantment or creature, so more removal is always great, and being on a stick, it's fantastic. We're not too worried about the ultimate. I mean, it would be a simple case of just putting in a Ulamog or a Kozilek or something like that if you wanted to have a target for that. I'm not too worried about that because we've got plenty of ways to sort of stacks them out and win the game inevitably. Chandra, Awakened Inferno, can't be countered. It sets a clock. If you've got a complete hard lock with Khan or something like that, it sets a clock, so you cannot, you can't do, you can't not win, essentially. There's no like inevitability. There is a definite inevitability with this. So even if you only get 1 tick off, and it being uncounterable is just absolutely so good, so good. Ugin the Ineffable. Colorless spells cost 2 less to cast, so this is just kind of like a big mana rock. a big mana discounter. You've got removal on a stick with the down tick, destroy target permanent. So that can do anything from lands to, it can't do lands because they're uncolored. It's got to be one or more colors. But you can be doing it on enchantments. You can be doing it on artifacts, on creatures. Yeah, and it's just quite efficient. Exiling the top card of your library face down. Essentially, that's another way to get that card with Khan. If you really needed to, you could tick up, have that card exiled, and then down tick with Khan. Just sort of more synergy with that. But most of the time, you're just using it for the 2/2 colorless spirit that you're going to create, and you'll get that card later anyway. So yeah, very cool. Creature-wise, we've got Walking Ballista. That's our main infinite out combo. We're not running a whole bunch of ways to go infinite or anything like that. It's not that kind of deck. But Walking Ballista is just too good as a creature and as an outlet to basically get the win on the spot sometimes. Goblin Welder, just a great way to swap your small thing for a big thing. So sort of pretty obvious there. Arcbound Ravager. We use it with Mirror Retriever and Scrap Trawler so that we can create some cool loops with our rocks and essentially, loop infinitely a whole bunch of effects or loop for positive mana, a whole bunch of cards once we've created discounts. Dockside, Goblin Engineer. Obviously, making artifacts is good. Goblin Engineer is just like a great card. Get a big thing, put it into your graveyard, and then reconstruct it with Osgir. Not really a whole lot of explanation needed for that. Archon of Emeria, just Stax, Aven Mindcenter, Stax, Magus of the Moon, Stax, Foundry Inspector, just a good cheap way to reduce all of your spells or your artifacts. Thalia, Heretic Cathar is just another great way to stop people from attacking you an extra turn early. Their lands come into play tapped if they're non-basic. Just a great card in this deck. Zerta the Dawnwaker, it's mostly just for that reduction of activation abilities. So occasionally it'll mean that our Osgir can get a Mycosynth Lattice a bit cheaper, but it's just a great card in general because we do have so many activated abilities, things like Lithoform, Engine, which we'll go over in a little bit as well. There's lots of ways that we can use this. It's also our infinite mana creator with something like your Basalt Monolith or Grim Monolith. So yeah, just a very good all-round card. Sorceries, we have Faithless Looting, Gamble, Vandal Blast, Cleansing Wildfire, Pillage, Stone Rain, Wheel of Fortune, Wheel of Misfortune, Armageddon, Ravages of War, Wrath of God, Boom Bust. So our mass land destruction, obviously just so good when we aren't really worried about having lands. It just stops us from, having a little bit of mana where most of our mana is going to be coming from mana rocks anyway. So we're pretty happy with that. We also have ways to recur the lands from our graveyard with things like even just Osgir, because we've got artifact lands. We can get them back out of the graveyard if they were artifact lands. We've got indestructible lands, so that's great too. And we've also got what is it called? It's the Crucible of Worlds, so that afterwards we can then play it and start getting those lands back slowly. Your Cleansing Wildfire, Pillage, Stone Rain should make sense. I think that they're great cards just because, once you get a Blood Moon effect like a Magus of the Moon or a Blood Moon out, then you're really just paying attention to what color do you need to get them off next and making sure that they can't sort of have access to those colors. So you don't need a whole bunch of these effects if you've got your Magus of the Moon or your Blood Moon out. But additionally, it's essentially just to control until you've actually started to Stax out the game a lot more. Vandal Blast is just a great card, but obviously you can use it overloaded with Mycosynth and destroys every permanent you don't control. It's really good. Faithless Looting and Gamble. Obviously Gamble being a tutor that you don't really care most of the time if the card that you put into your hand actually goes into your graveyard, so you're pretty happy with that most of the time. Faithless Looting, obviously a great card as well. We don't have the Underworld Breach. I just haven't really worked out whether or not this is the kind of deck where we need to put maybe a Storm card like Grape Shot and Underworld Breach and LED or something like that, or whether or not it needs to sort of be in there just right now. Instance, we've got Enlightened Tutor that just gets us something to win the game. Swords to Plowshares, obviously great card. We're not running Path because we don't want to give our opponents a free land. That's obviously sort of against the game plan of Stax. Abrade, Deflecting SWAT, these are just, control tools, destroy artifacts, destroy lands, stop a counterspell, that kind of stuff. Valakut Awakening, it's a land, but it's also just to cycle our cards and, shape our hand a bit better. Wear and Tear, you've got your Abrade and your Disenchant on a single card, so it's good enough. I don't like running just direct Disenchant effects, I just don't find them strong enough a lot of the time, but Wear and Tear is good enough because you've got that flexibility. Boil's just a great card, more targeted hate against our blue players because we don't have counterspells, so why should anyone else have access to blue? Seems fine to me. Things like Boros Charm and Teferi's Protection, great cards, but what we want to be using them for is protecting our lands just before we set off a mass land destruction spell. So we phase out all of our lands, or we give them all indestructible right before we cast that Armageddon or Ravages of War or Boom Bust. Artifacts. So the majority of our mana is going to come from these. So you can see how many 0-drop artifacts we've got. Chrome Mox, Jeweled Lotus, Lotus Bloom, Lotus Petal, Mana Crypt, Mox Amber, Mox Diamond, Mox Opal, Mox Tantalite. All of these are just absolutely crazy. So if we have a loot effect, we could do things like put a Mox Tantalite or a Lotus Bloom into our graveyard, and then we immediately reanimate it twice for free, and it doesn't have to have all of those suspend counters put on it. So Lotus Bloom, for example, you can literally just put it into the graveyard, tap your commander, and then you've got 6 mana for whenever you need it. It's just absolutely crazy. And then you can do that all again with Khan. Mox Tantalite, similar thing. Obviously all of the other Moxes, just great. All of that acceleration super quick. Mox Amber is a bit problematic sometimes. We don't have a whole range of cards that are legendary, but we should be getting our commander out fast enough that it doesn't really matter, either way. So we've got our more traditional mana rocks, so Mana Vault, Sol Ring, Arcane Signet, Boros Signet, Grim Monolith, Talisman, Basalt Monolith. Replicating Ring is a bit spicy, but in a Stax deck, I think the inevitability of it going off is a lot higher. That's where we're going to be getting a whole bunch of our mana from, is all of those. And Basalt Monolith and Grim Monolith obviously go infinite with your Zerda as well. So we've got Cloud Key. They also go infinite with Rings of Bright Earth and Lithoform Engine 2, which is great. So Cloud Key, Crucible, Ensnaring Bridge. Cool thing about Ensnaring Bridge is because we're running Umbral Mantle, we can sometimes push our commander out before it's big, and our Ensnaring Bridge it gets under, and then we make it huge after the attacks are declared, or we can just sacrifice the Ensnaring Bridge when we need to attack, and then bring it back to protect ourselves afterwards. So just really good. Winter Orb and Static Orb, Tangle Wire, all of these should make sense. They're just like very classic Stax pieces for this kind of deck. I think that they just fit in super nicely. And because we can break parity with them by sacrificing them and then bringing them back, getting an extra turn cycle where we're not affected and everyone else is choked out, I think is just really good for this kind of deck. Enchantments wise, we've got Deafening Silence, Land Tax, Blood Moon, Rule of Law, Smothering Tithe. Just all tax effects should make sense. We don't care if we're only playing one spell a turn. A lot of the time we're going to be activating abilities or bringing things in from the graveyard, and we don't have to worry about any of that. So I think it's great. Land Tax is just good because we can, more often we're going to have less lands than other players because we just run so few of them. It just means that we can fish a whole bunch of cards out of our library, thin out the deck, which is actually pretty relevant. By getting to resolve a land tax, you're actually going to take 10% of the lands, or more than 10% out of your lands out of your library. So that's a pretty significant improvement. And that's pretty much it. Lands wise, we've got all of your artifact lands. We've got Ancient Tomb, most of the relevant fetch lands. We've got a few cuter lands, so like Cascading Cataracts, Flagstones of Trachea. They're kind of like pseudo indestructible. They're not exactly that, but you're kind of using them as indestructible lands, or lands that replace themselves after you boom bust, or after you mass land destruction. Darksteel Citadel, another indestructible land as well. We've got Ghost Quarter, Wasteland, Strip Mine. Those three are all just extra land destruction spells. Probably the only other thing that's quite spicy would be Khan's Bastion. We've got quite a number of Planeswalkers. I just think it's a great card. We don't have a whole lot of difficult to cast spells, so you'll see, I think there's only 2 cards in the whole list that have a double red pip, so that would be Pillage and your Chandra Awakened Inferno. So we don't have to worry about it if we've got 1 or 2 pieces of colorless mana that we're looking at. So I think it's a fine include in this list. So some of the cool things that we can actually do with our commander with your Ancient Den or your Darksteel Citadel or Great Furnace is you can sacrifice them and then bring them out for free, and it's actually land ramp because we are, essentially only tapping them to bring in 2 copies of them. So these are just really cute little things that you can do to get ahead, in a sort of deck that isn't going to be, in a pod that's not going to be particularly fast. This is just ways that you can break that parity with it. Most of the time, your Scrap Trawler combos are going to be able to get you there. Getting Infinite Mana and then tutoring for Walking Ballista is another super easy way, or even just putting out your Mycosynth Lattice and Karn lock effect after you've Wrathed, or after you've Ravaged rather, or Armageddon, will basically get you there most of the time. I've not really built much in the way of Stax decks before, and I've never built a Boros commander, so this is very much my first take on a type of list like this. Would very much appreciate anyone leaving any comments in the description or reaching out on Moxfield or on Twitter for suggestions on how to improve the deck. I'm very keen to give this a go quite competitively. I think that this has got a real good shot of having an actual list get into a CEDH pod and being into an actual CEDH contender within the meta, just based on how powerful he is. Thanks so much for having a look at the video, and yeah, feel free to leave any comments about suggestions or changes that you'd like to see. Bye for now.